Back. We are going to talk about a rivalry local to us here in northern Kentucky, that being the one right across the river, the Crosstown Shootout, University of Cincinnati versus Xavier University. And we're going to start this with a major altercation that happened on the basketball court. Some of you might remember this incident. If you're not familiar with it, we will watch a quick video clip here.
Draws a charge and he's pumped. As the buzzer sounds at the end of the half, a Cincinnati player gets up from the bench and starts talking to Lions. The two had to be separated, and Lions has some choice words, which not only can you not hear, but you won't even be able to see them. That's how bad they were. Really bad. Second half, Xavier up 13. Holloway with a nice drive and a tricky lay-in, and then he's going to hug one of his fans up close and personal. Xavier up 16 after the free throw. Less than 3 minutes to go. Holloway drives, we can't get it to go, but there's Kenny Freeze. Great jam. He had 13 points, but that wasn't the image of Freeze that we'll remember when this game was over. Less than 30 seconds to play. Lions, nice bounce pass to Holloway. And watch Holloway jawing at the bench on his way back up the floor. Final seconds of the game. Here we go. Holloway continues to jaw, and there's Leland Gwynn. They come face-to-face. Bench is clear. Brawl ensues. Now, Freeze gets the worst of everything. You can see him there crawling on the floor. He takes a straight right hand and then is stomped on right there. Meanwhile, Gates continues to spar with other players as Freeze is getting attention from the medical staff. Gates is senior, and he's from Cincinnati, so it's the final time he played in this game. Both coaches trying to get their teams under control. Chris Mack telling his players to get off the floor. Mick Cronin trying to do the same. The referees would call the game with 9.4 seconds left as Xavier wins. Here's Holloway's post-game reaction to the chaos on the court.
Yeah, you know, that's what you're going to see from Xavier in Cincinnati. And we got disrespected a little bit before the game. Guys calling us out. We're a tougher team. We're grown men over here. We got a whole bunch of gangsters and a lot of not thugs, but tough guys on the court. And we went out there and zipped them up at the end of the game. That's our motto, zip them up. And that's what we just did to them. I was hearing on Twitter or whatever, one of those guys called me out, said I wasn't starting on their team or whatever the case may be. Then those guys saying they were better than us. But you don't talk before the game. It always go down. Well, you talk after the game. And you let your play on a court talk for you.
If somebody put their hands in your face or try to do something to you, where we from, you're going to do something back. You know, we're not going to sit there and get our face beat in by somebody like Yancey Gates or somebody. You don't let that happen. And y'all amp it up so much. It's like, y'all make it an animosity. You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't do this. Like, this is a rivalry game, which I expect from us.
If my players don't act the right way, they will never play another game at Cincinnati. Right now, I just told my guys, I will decide. I'm going to meet with my AD and my president, and I'm going to decide who's on the team going forward. That's what the University of Cincinnati is about. Period. I told them the way I feel. I've never been this embarrassed. I'm hoping President Williams doesn't ask me to resign after that. I made everybody take their jersey off, and they will not put it on again until they have a full understanding of where they go to school and what the university stands for and how lucky they are to even be there, let alone have a scholarship. Because there's a whole lot of kids that can't pay for college. They're all sitting in there with no jersey on. Some of them I physically took them off.
I think that is somewhat of an interesting visual to think about. Mick Cronin, who's not a very big guy, trying to take the jersey off of some of his players. But obviously the fight itself was nothing to laugh at. And I chose that highlight to show you because it illustrates also something we can learn from the standpoint of media relations, right? And while there was a big fallout from the fight, some of which we'll get into in just a minute, one of the positive things that came out of it was Mick Cronin got a lot of accolades or people's respect for the way that he handled it in the post-game press conference. He didn't put any of his players out there, you know, the media relations person, the sports information director, for the University of Cincinnati probably made the right call there after the incident to not have the players out there to talk to the media. You saw that Xavier did have their players out there, which was probably not the right call at the time. And you saw one of the players refer to themselves as a bunch of gangsters. Now remember, this is a Jesuit Catholic institution. That comment got a lot of play locally in the media and pushback quite a bit from Xavier alumni about how could you have a player refer to their own team as gangsters. I think he realized quickly, right after the words came out of his mouth, that that was perhaps not the correct phrasing to use. But of course those players were hyped up. You know, it was an incident that happened, and the sports information director at the time probably made the wrong call by letting them go out there, and he or she would probably tell us that, that was a mistake to let them go out there and not give them a chance to calm down probably for an entire day or so before they did any sort of interviews in the media. So that's one side takeaway, I guess, from the incident. We have a little bit of a background that we've been able to get, or I've been able to get, and former classes have been able to get from two of our alumni, one of which works for Xavier in the athletic department and one of which works for UC in the athletic department. So they were able to give us, have talked to me about their perspectives of the incident and have visited classes in the past. And what they took away was that the environment at the game, I was not at the game, but from their perspective, the environment at the game was rather hostile in that the Xavier student section, I guess, was jawing with some of UC's players' parents in the crowd, was one of the things that I heard, and that the officials should have stepped in a little bit earlier, and the game security and game personnel, ushers and things that are responsible for some of the crowd control, could have done a little bit more in retrospect to diffuse the situation before it got to the fight. Of course, the fight happening between the players on the court. And so it's something that, you know, it's unfortunate for both schools. It's an unfortunate incident for our city because the rivalry is so popular here that it happened. But it's something that we can learn from the rivalry or from the fight, is how to recognize that in advance that a situation is brewing that could lead to violence on the court, which nobody wants to see. So from some of the other fallouts from that particular fight was that they changed the name of the rivalry from the Shootout to the Crosstown Classic for a few years, and they played it at a neutral site. So that game, as you probably noticed from the video, was played at Xavier, where the fight happened, and then they played for a few years at US Bank Arena downtown. So a neutral site, not on the campus of either one. But college basketball and college sports is all about sort of campus and that college environment, right? And so they lost something when they took it to a neutral site, you know, some of that college feel to the game. And so after a few years, and of course tempers cooled over that time a little bit, and they took it back to campus sites. So now they do alternate each year, either playing in Clifton on the campus of UC or Norwood on Xavier's campus. This is also a great example of a rivalry that the sponsor plays a huge role in. Most of you, if you're here locally, probably could have told me the sponsor even before I revealed it there on the slide, Skyline Chili. And Skyline has built their brand around the city as being sort of a staple of the city itself. And so there's a very good sponsor match to this rivalry, in my opinion, and I do a lot of research on sponsorship. Because Xavier and UC are the two most prominent institutions at least on the Ohio side of the river, not to put down NKU in any way, but they're the most prominent institutions in Cincinnati proper. most prominent higher educational institutions in Cincinnati proper. And so they sort of represent the city of Cincinnati, and it is in some ways a crosstown shootout. There's a USA Today article posted on Canvas that goes along with this video. And in the USA Today article, you saw them make a point about the fact that these campuses are only 3 miles apart. And that also leads to lots of alumni interaction, fan interaction, player interaction, right? They play in the same summer leagues, a lot of these players on these two teams. So they know each other, and they know each other well, and that can lead to two different things. It can lead to familiarity and maybe some shared experiences and an element of respect, but it can also lead to some animosity and some amped up adrenaline when the rivalry happens, because you know you're going to have to face these people day in and day out living in the same city, and so you want to have those bragging rights for your squad beating the other team. So that I think heightens the intensity, the fact that they are only 3 miles apart and that the fans run into each other, work at the same places, go to the same restaurants, go to the same churches. They're in the same social circles. It also creates competition for personnel in terms of recruiting. There's quite a few instances of players that chose one or the other school but were being recruited by both schools. So that adds to the intensity of the rivalry as well. One other thing that I failed to mention about Skyline, and a nice thing about Skyline as the sponsor of this rivalry, is Skyline, of course, has many locations around greater Cincinnati and in the metro region. And they help to promote the rivalry. So Skyline helps the schools promote the rivalry by having point of purchase displays, and having logos of the Crosstown Shootout on table tents and on table placemats in some of their locations, and decals on the windows and things like that in some locations, which serves the purpose of promoting the schools in addition to the rivalry. So that's a nice benefit for the institutions, and it's a benefit that rivalry can create for the parties involved, is promoting each other. We talked about symbiosis in an earlier session, an earlier rivalry, where because of the rivalry, it elevates the brand of both schools. So why are these two schools rivals? Well, I'll get my chalkboard out here, as I like to do, and we'll make a list. So we've already talked about, we have there on our slide, competition for personnel. We'll put that on our list here. We have geography, of course, geographic proximity. I mentioned that that Xavier is a Jesuit institution. Of course, UC is a secular, a public school. UC is much larger than Xavier. Xavier is actually not that large. NKU has greater enrollment than Xavier. And so you have these cultural differences between the institutions. One being secular and very large, state institution, and the other institution being religiously affiliated and relatively small compared to the other. So I'm going to put cultural difference on our list here. Now this is one of the few rivalries that we'll study where we have geographic proximity on our list, and we also have cultural difference. Typically culture, as it concerns rivalry, will be highly correlated with geography. If you have two institutions or two teams or clubs that are in the same location, a lot of times, they share quite a bit of the same culture. And of course, these two institutions share the culture of Cincinnati, but as their institutional culture goes, they're quite a bit different. And I think that does add to the rivalry itself. Even the colors of the schools one being blue and white and the other being black and red, are kind of at odds to each other. So we could probably add that as well. I'm going to put star power on here. You've had a lot of great players, NBA, that went on to become NBA players, come through each of these different schools. The coaches take on sort of star status within the city and regionally and sometimes nationally. When we think back to Bob Huggins at UC is a great example of a national profile and a star, whether you like him or not. So I'll put star power on there as well. Defining moments. We watched one of the defining moments, negative defining moment, but there's also been many positive defining moments as well in this rivalry. We'll put that on the list. I think we could put relative parity on here as well, meaning that the two schools, it's uncertain who's going to win. One of them has not necessarily dominated the rivalry. They both have a pretty high stature programs. So we will put parity on the list, and then lastly, I'm barely going to fit it on my chalkboard here, but we will put frequency of play. Now yes, they only play once a year, but remember, they're in different conferences, which means that they have to make it a priority to schedule each other. And they do that. You know, they play every year, annually. And like I said, for a while it was at a neutral site right after the incident, but now they're back to campus locations, and I think everybody agrees that that's what college sports is about. So here's our list: competition for personnel, geographic proximity, cultural difference, star power, defining moments, parity, and relative frequency of play, considering that they're in different conferences.